Morning guys. So purpose of this video is to just run through a few knots which I use for various situations. I'm doing this because I do get asked quite a few questions by people about which knot do you use to join some braid to some mono or fluorocarbon, or what do I do to join two pieces of braid together, or how can I form a D, or the D for a chod rig, or a D rig. And I just think, well, they're basic knots really that people should know. So I thought I'd just do a quick video on a few knots to try and help people understand how to tie them. So I've got an old piece of polystyrene which I've cut down to, hopefully so you can still see and hear me, but we can actually see what we're doing with the materials and the way that we're tying the knot. And I've got a few bits and bobs here with me. I've got some braid and some mono and a hook, just to show you. Now this is just to show you obviously how to tie the knots. It's not necessarily putting the full rig together. That's really down to you to sort of how you want to have your rigs, but this is sort of just to show you the knots. So I'm going to start with something nice and simple, a grinner knot. So I'm using some uncoated braid to show you this. Now a grinner knot, you can use it for or you can use grinner knots to obviously tie directly to your hooks. You can use them for you can use a back-to-back grinner knot to join two pieces of braid together, or two pieces of mono together. I use a grinner knot for attaching the leader, or if it's a leader with a loop on it, I use a grinner knot for that. Or if I want to attach the lead clip, where you've got a lead clip that's got a swivel on the end, or it's got the eye on the end already, you can attach using a grinner. You can use them for swivels. You can use it for a whole variety of situations. So I'm just going to show you with this eye of this hook how to attach it via a grinner. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily do it in this situation, but it's just to show you how to tie the knot. So if you just wet the end obviously so that you can get it through the eye. So you've got it through the eye of the hook or the swivel, whatever it is that you're attaching. Just get a little bit closer, and then what you want to do is you've got the two pieces. So you've got the tag end, what we call the tag end, and then you've got the main length there. If you form a loop like that, so that you've got, if you like, what you've got is you've got a loop there and a loop there as well. Okay, now what you want to do is you want this main line and this loop to actually be together like that, and this tag end that you've formed around like that, you want to then take it through through that gap there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do 5 if you want. I mean, 4 or 5 is about right for a grinner, no more. And then just pull the tag end. Sorry about the dog. Pull the tag end like that, and then you get a knot that forms there. So at this stage, wet it. Always wet your knots, and then just tease down that knot by pulling this main bit here. And then obviously just before you get to the very end, just to tidy it up, pull the tag end, pull that knot there, and then there you have a grinner knot. Now what you do at this stage is obviously you cut off the tag end, and that, you know, that's a strong knot, as I say, for swivels, for attaching lead clips, for back to back. You can do them back to back where you're attaching two pieces of braid together. So that's the grinner. Now I'm just going to cut that off there so I can do the next knot. I'll show you the next knot. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is the D rig. So this is the water knot. So I think if you remember, like Danny Fairbrass's video about the slip D, or the D rig that he uses, he ties a water knot. It's a spade. If you're used to tying or attaching spade end hooks, it's that knot that you would tie for that type of situation. So in our situation, we're using it so to obviously attach the line to the bend of the hook for a D rig. Or for a chod rig, depends on how you tie your chod rigs, but you know, you can use it for that as well. So the way I start with this knot is, again, I'm just using the braid so that you can see what I'm doing, because if I tie this for a rig, I would normally use like a fluorocarbon or a stiff material, because of the way I want the rig to work. But it's easier for me to sort of show you this using this dark braid, because it obviously just picks up better in the video. So I'll start by holding the bend of the hook in my left hand, and then I've got a smallish tag end coming off the eye, and what I do with that is I form a loop underneath the hook. But I want that tag end sticking out beyond the eye of the hook. So I've just got this loop underneath now, like that. Okay. And then what we do is we're actually going to go around the hook with this loop, but we've got to make sure that we trap this tag end as we go around. So what you want to do is you want to go over the hook like that, and just make sure that the tag end is coming out, but this has gone over the top of it. And do that, you know, sort of, well, I would do it sort of 3 or 4 times with a stiff material, because with the stiff material it will hold much better. So I'm going to do it 4 times with this. Now with this braid it is quite fiddly, but you will find with the stiff material that it is actually easier to tie. And then once you've done that, what you do is you pull that tag end. Okay, now don't worry about pulling it too tight at this stage, because what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to slide that knot back up the hook, sorry, like that. Okay. Now with the stiff material, what you do then is you would attach some sort of bait screw, or you might use a ring swivel. Depends on how you attach your baits, you know, so this is really down to you preference, but you've got to add something on there to attach the bait. Now I'm using a small bait screw, so just slide that down the material that you're using, and then obviously it's sitting sort of on the hook like that. Okay, don't worry about this tag end at the moment, I'll show you what we do with that. And then what you do is you then get the end that's coming out from the bend of the hook, you fold that back and you put it through the eye. Okay, so in effect what you've done is you've formed, or you've started to form on the back of the hook a D. So that's the D. That's where the reference to the D rig comes from. And that bait screw is sliding up and down on that D. Okay, now obviously you can't leave it like that, so what you've got to then do is you've got to attach this to the hook, and all you do is you just use the knotless knot approach. So depending on how big you want the D, I would typically do it that's sort of that kind of size. So just move that out of your way. Okay, and then just do a knotless knot. Make sure that the line, when you're passing it through back through the eye, that it comes out on the inside of the hook, because again that helps with the mechanics of the rig. And then wet that, and then you can sort of just tidy that up by pulling that tight. Now at this stage, again, as I say, because I'm using braid, I'm simply using the braid to show you how to tie the knot. But at this stage, you know, you'd have a stiffer material which would sit on there lovely. And then what you do is you just trim that bit off there. Yeah, these scissors are not very good. And then I would blob that with a lighter, not on this now, but obviously with the stiff material you could blob that with a lighter. And then if you can see there now, you've got, that's the D, and that's obviously in a stiff material. That would be great for a D rig, for a wafter or a bottom bait. And you know, you could, if you wanted, personally I wouldn't bother, but you could put some shrink tube on there, and then obviously, you know, you can maybe put some putty or something on the hook link, and then you'd have a overhand loop or whatever you want to attach it to then attach it to your rest of your rig, your clip. Okay, so that's that water knot or spade end knot, which you can use for that particular rig. Now I've showed you a knotless knot as well, so you've now got the grinner knotless knot and the water knot, the spade. I'm going to show you a 4-turn water knot now, which is what I personally use for attaching two materials together. Now this is two materials of the same type, so I would use it for, say, if you were fishing a leader on your spod rod or your marker rod, you know, so you're attaching two different strengths of braid together. I would use a 4-turn water knot. Right, Barney, shut up. Bloody dog. The carp dog. He's obviously trying to get in on the action. So I would use this to attach two types of braid together. So as I say, you can use it for your leaders, for your spod rod or your marker rod, or if you want to, like, you know, attach two different mono filaments together, then you could use it for that as well. I mean, I used to use this in a match fishing situation if I was attaching the main line to the hook length, but nowadays, because I'm solely just doing specimen carp fishing or specimen fishing, I use it for the braid situation. So when you're doing this, obviously you need one of the pieces of braid to be free, the other end. So don't do it if you've got a spod attached or something, because you've got to get this to go through. In a minute I'll show you've got to get it to go through a loop, and that's not going to work very well if you've got a great big spod or a marker float or whatever hanging off the end. So do it with a free length of braid, and you can do it you might have a 20 foot length of braid. You can do it, you just got to make sure that you're gradually feeding it through, and I'll show you what to do. So you lay the two pieces of braid across each other like that, okay, and then holding them together you form in both of them a big loop. So this is the longer piece that you might eventually be attaching your spod or your marker or your lead that you're going to actually have a feel about on the lake bed with, and then this is the shorter tag end, which will be from this piece. So you've got the two formed in a loop, and then simply what you do is you take the two pieces and you pass them through this loop that you've formed 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now again making sure that you keep the 2 tag ends together and nice and even. You just pull that together. Wet it before you finish the knot. Always wet your knots before you finish them. Okay, now that is a 4-turn water knot, which what you're going to do then is you're going to pull tight, and you need to pull the tag ends together. You need to pull the 2 main bits together. But that now, obviously, you cut off the tag ends. Now with a braid, sometimes, especially if you're using like a heavy spod, you're using this to attach your spod in your leg. These are your 2 tag ends here in my right hand, and this is the 2 main lines. You don't want to cut the 2 main lines, obviously. So what I would do is when I cut the tag ends, I leave maybe 1 inch. So especially for spodding, I'll leave an inch or so like that, because that will pass through the rings of the rod a lot easier than if you cut it right down to it being a knot. And trust me, you can use that for spodding. I've used that for spodding, for attaching a braided leader to my mainline braid for spodding for donkey shears, and it's never ever let me down, as long as you tie it how I've showed you and you wet the knot before you pull it together. Now I use a sort of, between sort of 18-20 pound braid with a 40 pound leader for spodding. Both braid materials, I use it for the marker float and I use it for my deeper, and I'm quite confident in just casting that out and that knot is not going to slip. If you're not comfortable with using that knot, then you can use 2 back-to-back grinners. So the way I showed you to tie the grinner knot, you can do 1 and then you can pass this other piece through and do another grinner and pull those 2 down together. But trust me, that 4-turn water knot will be fine. You'll have no problems with that. So just to bring me to the final knot, which I think is probably the most complicated one out of all of them. Now this is what's called the Albright knot, and this is what I would personally use to attach two different pieces of material together. So typically braid, and attaching it to monofilament or a fluorocarbon. So if you're tying a combi rig, or if you're using your main line and you're using a braided leader, for example, then you might use this knot in that situation. So I've got some monofilament here, and again I'm just using this monofilament because it's a darkish colour. Hopefully you can pick it up better on the video. Clearly if I used a fluorocarbon, you're going to struggle to see that against this white background. So I'm using these two materials. So here's the braid and this is the monofilament. Now what you want to do with this is, in the first instance, it's quite fiddly, but with practice you will get it right, and some simple things to remember. Make sure you give yourself a reasonable length of line for what you want to do. So if you're only tying a very short mono or fluorocarbon section for a combi rig, for example, and you only want it to be very short, then don't attach. Personally, I wouldn't attach your hook at this stage. I'd tie this knot and this loop first, and then I'd attach your hook, because you'll find that it's really, really fiddly, and you might get the hook actually in your finger depending on how sharp it is. But it's up to you. Practice obviously what you're comfortable with. So just to show you the Albright knot with no hook on or anything else. So form a loop in the monofilament. Have a fairly long tag end, a fairly big loop, and then take your braid through the loop of the monofilament, and just note obviously which way you took it through. So I've gone through the bottom, okay. And then what you want to do is, now at this stage, you want to I'll transfer it to my other hand, because I just find it easier. And what you're doing is you're starting to form the knot, which eventually I'm going to pull down and show you. But what you do is you take the braid and you start to wrap the braid around the monofilament. Now what you're going to find with this is that braid is not going to sort of go round very easily, so you've got to tease it round the monofilament whilst you keep this tag end and this loop out of the way. Now I'm going to do that 5 times just to sort of show you here. If you're tying it for a combi rig, then 5, maybe 7 times is what you want to do. So transfer it back to the other hand now, and if you can see here, the braid has gone through that way. So I've come up through that way, but it's going out obviously down. What you want to do with this tag end is, now you want to make sure that you go the same way, because if you go the other way, when you pull the knot together, it will just unravel. So make sure that you go back through the same way that you came in, if you see what I mean. Okay, so we're going to go back through that loop with that piece of braid, and now you can see that the knot is starting to come together. So what we do at this stage is wet it. Okay, so just tease down the tag end and then start to pull the main line down to the knot, and just tidy that up, pull the two together. Just keep pulling the two together. And again, this is why it's helpful to do this if you're doing it as a rig when you haven't got the hook on, because you need to give it a good pull. And I'm proper pulling that there now, and that that's not going anywhere. If you hadn't have gone through the right way, what you would find at this stage is those two would just pull apart, which shows that you haven't gone through the right way. So just start again and make sure that you you do it the right way. But that, you can see that's solid now, and that that is the knot in effect. That's the Albright knot. That's now attached, that braid, to that piece of mono, and that is a really, really strong and good knot for attaching two different pieces of material. So at this stage, what you obviously then do is just take off your tag ends, depending on what situation you're using it for, but just take off your tag ends, and then you'll see there that you've got the Albright knot with those two materials attached to each other. I'm sorry that this camera's not quite picking that up very well, but hopefully you'll see it in a minute. There we go. Oh, there you go. So you can just make that out now. Okay, so that's your two materials. Now, in a combi rig situation, obviously this is going to be your hook end. So just taking that hook that we had, we've got the braided, so we've got a D-rig there in effect. So what you could do, if you wanted, you could have that braid and then have the mono as the combi link, or you could have the mono just attached to the braid. So if you were doing it this way, where you're attaching the for a combi rig for this, in this situation, with a braided link on the hook length, then what I would, again, it is a bit tight to do it, but what I would suggest is that you put the hook right next to the loop when you do it. So again, we're going to pass that through the bottom. We're going to hold it in our other hand with the hook, and then we're going to wrap this braid around this rig, around this monofilament, and I'm just going to do it sort of 3 or 4 times to show you on this rig. Make sure that it goes around the two pieces. Okay, transfer it back into this hand, so you've now got that situation. Make sure that the braid goes back through the way that it came out originally, which, if you hold the loop like that and you've passed it through the bottom, then you've got to put the braid back through the top. That's the easiest way to sort of remember it. And then at this stage, just pull that tag end down. This is where you've got to watch the hook, because what you're going to find now is when you wet it and then you pull that tight, that does sort of stretch the rig out a little bit. Okay, so just pull that tight like that, and then what you've got is the two tag ends, which you've got to take off. And then once you've done that, you've then got your combi rig. So if you were to fish it like this with a D, I mean, I've just showed you that because that's that D rig that I tied earlier. You've then got the braid, a small section of braid, which is about 1 inch, which, to be honest, that's perfect. I think that's perfect for that soft, supple section. And what you can do is, if you want to, which is what I would do, I'd put a tiny little bit of putty around that knot, so that now is attached to the monofilament by an Albright knot, and it's it's as strong as any knot that you'll tie. Put a little bit of putty around there, and then if you want, you can fish it as a pop-up like that. So that's almost as high as what maybe a Ronnie rig would go, or a small stiff hinge. Or you can just fish it, you know, as a bottom bait with a wafter, still with the putty there, because what that putty will do is, obviously when a fish picks it up, it'll help to pull the hook point down into the lip. So there you go, there's a combi rig tied using an Albright knot, and there's the Albright knot to just attach mono to braid, which you might do in a leader situation. Okay, so that's the main knots that I wanted to show you. I hope you found that useful. Obviously I'm going to put this video on YouTube and on my Facebook webpage, so if you're interested, give it a like, and tight lines.